Hello, today is Tuesday, May the 7th. We are reading today out of the book of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah is beginning his statements of condemnation and correction to Judah for their failure to continue to follow God. Now, if you read Jeremiah, if you read it straight through, one of the things that's important to know is that Jeremiah is not written in chronological order. In this case, the editing of the Bible scholars is very helpful to understand what situation Jeremiah is talking about. The chapter today is chapter 2, and the verse that I picked is one of the most famous verses in Jeremiah. It reads as follows in verse 13, "My people have committed two crimes. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and they have dug wells, broken wells that can't hold water." Now, for us to get into the mindset of Jeremiah and to get into the way of the thinking of the people of the day is vital for us to understand what Jeremiah is saying. Indeed, it's a humorous statement, and I'm sure the people who heard Jeremiah speak this, and these were all sermons when they started, would have laughed had it not been about them. It is a hilarious story or just a couple lines of foolishness. So let's explain what's happening so we can get it. Perhaps you already know, but every village and every town, every location where people live needed a source of water, of course. The absolute best source of water that you could find would be a living spring. Water constantly coming out of the ground. Villages look for two things. They look for defensibility and for water. And this was the best source you could find because it was always flowing, it was always fresh, it was always clean. The best source, a spring of living water. Now the second source, and most often used, was that of a river or a stream that was not seasonal. So you would always have a flow of water. But of course, you could get a drought and the river or stream would dry up. Something could happen upstream and your water would be contaminated or not clean. But mostly that was a great source. The absolute worst way to get water was to try and collect rainwater during the season when it came down and to have it run off into some hole in the ground where you would try to store it. But the only way you could store it is if you lined that hole in the ground with some sort of waterproof lining. Wells for groundwater are not waterproof. The water would just leak away unless it was lined with something that refused to let the water go away. And what Jeremiah says is, the people of that day, in their turning away from God, have packed up and moved away from a constant, reliable source of life-giving water. And they instead have moved to a place where the only source of water they have is a hole in the ground where when the water collects, it just leaks right away and they end up with nothing. It is a pretty foolish picture of what people have chosen to do. In that day, no one would do that in their real life. But Jeremiah says in their spiritual life, this is just what they have done. Now I'll leave the application to you. But let's remember this. Jesus says, I am the living water. So that whenever we turn away from him, we are committing the same foolishness. And God says that if we will be devoted to him, he will provide everything we need appropriately. But when we try and do it on our own, we often just find ourselves in broken, water-leaking holes in the ground from which we cannot escape. I hope this picture stays with me this week as I think about what it would mean for me to continue to be attached fully and completely with great trust to my source of living water, Jesus Christ. I hope your week goes well, and I hope you attach to Jesus in your own way fully with all the trust you have.